Serious teachers of Reddit, what red flags have you seen in your students? What happened? Former teacher here. I still work with middle school and high school students. 1. If a kid is below high school age and constantly tired or drowsy, that's something worth doing some work understanding. There may not be anything nefarious going on, but children are very energetic. Something is off in some way. Not necessarily abuse, per se. That is leading the child away from sleep when she should be doing just that. 2. If a student is somewhat withdrawn but also constantly looking forward to social events, that's an indicator that something needs to be looked into. I currently have an 8th grader I work with who is pretty distant from his peers, but is always keeping up with the calendar for when we would have a recreational gathering. This guy's home life is broken as broken could be, and one of his parents is close to the most conniving and manipulative people I've ever met. The kid desires friendship, but his ability to relate to people is so warped that he has a really hard time doing it. The drowsy, tired one is something I wish my parents and teachers took seriously. I ended up giving up because I just couldn't stay awake in class. I got diagnosed with narcolepsy in my mid-20s after being punished for my entire childhood and teen years. No lasting damage there. Lol. I'm a student, but when I was being abused, here are some red flags I wish the teachers had noticed. 1. Sudden disengagement from all school activities. 2. Constant crying and obvious fear. 3. Little to no interaction with peers. 4. Isolating themselves during school hours. 5. Parents entirely control parent-teacher meetings, never letting the student talk. 6. Student never mentions home life, or becomes visibly uncomfortable at its discussion. 7. Severe weight loss, poor hygiene, poor focus, if it helps. And I don't know where you're from, but in the UK we are trained now to spot these sorts of things. Obviously we are not perfect, but we regularly undergo training and refreshing on the flags for abuse and neglect. We also have a computerized tracking system at my school that we upload any and all concerns on to, so that we build a picture of the child as a whole. We put even minor things on there like the child coming in hungry or dirty. It all adds up. I hope that you're doing okay and that you have access to help if you need it. We have 4 fairly active gangs in our neighborhood, and a lot of students have family members that belong to one of them this year. When we know a student has a gang affiliation, we try our best to keep them engaged in after-school activities and programs as much as possible. Usual red flags are sudden shift in friend group, clothing, or tagging the school. We are usually pretty good at identifying and supporting students so they don't end up as active members. We did have a 10th grader transfer in last year who slipped under the radar. He was only at our school for 7 weeks before he brought a gun and shot a middle school student, separate building on a shared campus, in the head on school property. Then the guy just went back to chemistry class like nothing happened. He was arrested like 20 minutes later while we were in lockdown. The victim did not make a full recovery and will need lifetime care. But he is alive. At least school got a lot of mental health support for the rest of the year, and nothing even close to that serious has happened since. 8. Living but requiring lifetime care isn't much of a bright spot. It's pretty much the only one I could find. I had this up feeling about this boy. I had his younger brother in my class. He was a 2nd grader, and he tried to rape one of the girls in his class. She had broken her arm and was in a heavy plaster cast, and managed to slam it into his face when he pulled her pants down enough to bloody his nose. His parents think it's her fault, by the way. Human scu, monsieur. What? How horrific. How old is 2nd grade where you are? Not that it matters what age, it's 7 to 8 where I am, monsieur. What happened to the parents? Surely they must have been investigated. What young child that isn't neglected and or abused would possibly know such a thing? The kids we have range in that class are 7 at youngest, 9 at oldest. He's almost 9. His family is living garbage, and the mom ran off because the dad refuses to get a divorce. I quote, "It's my right not to have." 1. The mom is a deep conspiracy theory person, and his brother, who I take care of, was misbehaving. Said, "Oh, mom says we were damaged by vaccines, so that's why we can't behave." Quote, "Guess who walked back into the kids' lives after 5 years? Her. The dad is a right prick. He's the type where he just puts them in front of the worst content that you could give a kid at that age. R-rated stuff with gore, rape scenes and the like. Hardcore shit." The sister was seized by a more stable aunt, but those kids are watching Saw and shit at 7 and 5. Dad is very much incel type dude. Women are trash and the like. Major changes in behavior are probably the #1 thing I watch for. Sudden decreases in interest, activity, talking, energy. It's been drugs, abuse, depression, and a variety of other things. Long absences and frequent tardiness without an explanation. I had a student that would always include lighting something on fire in his essays. I got him some help right away when I realized there was a pattern. But I also had a teacher friend who was called to testify at the Menendez brothers' trial in Cali. They were the brothers that killed their rich parents. The writing sample was super creepy. I don't remember details, but I remember it being very disturbing. Currently in my 9th year of teaching. Prior to being a teacher, I was a youth fitness instructor at a YMCA. Had a 12-year-old kid that would not listen to anything. Was insanely hyperactive, had a glazed-over look on his face at all times, and was generally just a piece of shit. Only reason he was allowed to stay in the program was because his aunt worked for us. Read the news one day. When he was in his early 20s, he murdered someone. Wasn't a big one at the time, but when I heard a student ditched my class while I was actually there that day, I had a feeling it was the start of some less than desirable behavior from her. She was a hard-working student, but some of her friends were of the shrug-it-off persuasion. So when I found out she had ditched, I pulled her from one of her classes to talk to her for a bit about how ditching can spiral into an apathy that's hard to recover from. Monsieur found out from another student a few months later that she had just been released from jail. She was walking with a gang member who had stowed his handgun in her backpack. She agreed to let him do it. She took the fall for him and was arrested instead. I'm really worried about her. She has so much potential. I'd hate to see her squander her future. Had a 6th grader about 13 years ago. At first he seemed nice and quiet. Girls would randomly yell at him and he had this sweet look on his innocent face. I'd scold the girls who'd try to say he was saying nasty things. I'd look at him and he'd just say they're liars. One day, during a test pretty early in the fall, I heard him lean over and call a girl a dirty slut who likes to fuck. I kicked him out of class. I didn't know what to do. After that, he'd show up to class. I'd try to talk to him and be a role model. He didn't care. Then I realized that sweet and quiet face was more like Norman Bates in the end of Psycho. He would just walk in my room and pretend to be a caged animal growling in the cupboard. I couldn't get him to sit. Had behavior issues in every class at that school. In 15 years in education, I can count the guaranteed wackos I've encountered on one hand. I knew he'd do evil in the world. He's currently serving a very long sentence for nearly killing an elderly woman during sexual assault. He doesn't deserve to be out. Ever. I used to work part-time at my local preschool when I was taking college classes. Anyways, there was this one kid. We will call him Abe. Me and the other teachers were highly concerned about him, to the point where someone constantly had to have their eyes on him. Monsieur had very violent tendencies. Sometimes it would be totally unprovoked. Purposely soiled himself even though he was potty trained. A few occasions would relieve himself in the middle of the class when you would be talking to him. and since he was 3 he needed to be at his level. Would be having a totally normal conversation and out of nowhere would slap you in the face and then smile about it. Never saw signs of remorse or guilt from Hi Monsieur. His main teachers had multiple meetings with the parents. They never seemed to really care about anything they said. Gave no effort with positiveness reinforcement. It was truly frustration and sad. I don't think he was abused, but I don't know. He never had any unexplained bruises or marks. He always had clean clothes and a full lunch. His parents would pick him up at his assigned time. He didn't act like he feared them when around the monsieur. I hope he is doing better now. You're basically describing my son, except for he did show remorse afterwards and the wedding himself thing. It took about 3 years from kindergarten to 3rd grade. But we finally got him a good psychiatrist and into a behavioral program in the school district. Within months he was a changed kid. His doctor also scraped his ADHD and A diagnosis and is leaning more towards a bipolar disorder diagnosis. They just are hesitant to label him so young, but they put him on an antipsychotic medication. Before he got into his program though, I would just break down and cry in therapy. I had zero doubt that he will eventually kill or harm someone. I was so worried, but I also couldn't just keep out of school. I literally did everything I could and even considered put him in residential treatment. I actually was seeking a referral when his special ed teacher said talk to this other lady in the district I know first. I actually have hope now that it won't happen, but I'm still leery of it. They want to eventually put him back in general education classes. Hopefully something like that happened with your student. I feel like personally not addressing something like that is just as neglectful as not taking care of the kid properly in the obvious ways, but in a different way, because that kind of stuff doesn't just fix itself. That kid will become a teenager soon enough, and then what? Oh my gosh, I am sorry that your son was struggling. But I am so happy to hear he is making progress, and you sound like a wonderful parent for finding all the resources possible to help them in all the best ways. I totally agree. Sometimes it's even easy to just label a kid as behaviorally challenged without trying to first understand the deeper layers of where those behaviors are coming from. Monsieur, I really hope his parents are doing good for him. It could have also just been an attention-seeking thing for him, but I think it's something that need attention. Taught a special needs IT class with a student who was openly opposed to computers. His parents too, apparently on religious reasons, and he had only been put in my class because the school wanted the money and there was nowhere else for him to go. He realizes he is in an IT class and freaks the fuck out. He pulled the front off of one of the computers and then ran away with it. I was in a wheelchair at the time, and suffice to say I wasn't even going to try to catch Hi Monsieur. I reported this, of course, and he was expelled, but we never got the front of that PC again. Taught for 3 years and I'm a pretty young teacher, so I still understand some of the references my students make, even if they don't think I get it. Listening to what they say can be a big indicator of what they do. My students really have no filter. Sudden changes in behavior, or sleeping a lot, more than the usual teenage lions, can be a sign of mental or physical illness. Students grinning at me, the teacher, too much, or talking too much can sometimes mean they're planning to fight another student and are trying to get me to let my guard down. Students suddenly acting more angry, quieter than usual, or, especially, avoiding eye contact can mean they're in withdrawal. Sudden reversal of this often means they're back on drugs. Avoidance of eye contact can also mean they've started taking drugs, as can excessive itching, touching arms, inability to sit still, mood swings or flitting eyes, wearing tight, long-sleeved shirts in warm weather, or moving arms overly carefully can be a signal of self-harm. Monsieur, if students are being bullied, they may seem nervous and quiet, or they may act aggressive and easily angered, or threaten to fight people for next to nothing. None of these things are always red flags, but I watch out for them so I can keep an eye on those kids. You're spot on with the bully one. I was relentlessly bullied my entire childhood and it turned me into an extremely angry person. It's taken years to get to the point I'm at now, and I still have a ton of work to do. Thank you so much for watching and have a good day.